You are listening to Pro Pels Talk, presented by Boot Crew Media.
First took away. Yes, with this. Get your money's worth. Now, that was exactly. Ingram. Timeout. Right here. Here's Zion for three. Hit it again. He loves being and how about Ingram on the floater? And the foul. Did you say floater?
What's up and welcome back. The home of your new head coach, Stan Van Gundy. Welcome to Pro Pels Talk. No Stephen Offner tonight. Teve is secret mission is what he wanted me to tell you. CIA secret mission. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Ross, what's up, brother?
Not much. Do you think we should call him Stan or Stanley?
I like Stanley.
You like he looks more like a Stanley than a Stan to me.
Yeah, he does. I like Stan. Let's go
Excited.
Stanley.
We got a coach.
Okay, we do have a coach.
We got a basketball coach.
We have a basketball.
Not necessarily the guy I wanted, but we got a basketball coach.
I didn't think
it's half the battle.
I really listen. All good teams have a good coach.
They all have a coach.
They have a coach.
At least one coach.
We have one coach.
We've got a
now,
coach.
we don't have a coaching staff, which I'm interested to talk about and dive in. Who knows what's going to happen? Ross, let's get your initial thoughts. Stan Van Gundy.
Yeah, so there's some good and bad for me. I think the bad is I'm still a little perplexed why it took this long to hire Stan Van Gundy. Mm-hmm. A guy without a job. Mm-hmm. His name wasn't really popping up in any of the other jobs.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I mean Stanley.
Sorry. So that part is still a little, kind of perplexing given that we needed stability. But let's put all that kind of on the back burner. I think what Van Gundy brings is something we lacked last year. He's historically been, had pretty good defensive teams. Now we can dive into this more. The Miami Heat teams, had Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal. The Orlando teams had peak Dwight Howard, Jameer Nelson,
Hito
some other. Well, Hito not really a great defender, but he's always had, even in Detroit, and he had, except for I think the last year, he had pretty good defensive teams even in Detroit.
He did,
and he had Andre Drummond. So if you go and look at that, Van Gundy's always had basically one of the elite rim defenders in the league. Andre Drummond, Dwight Howard, Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah. That's something we don't really have right now. So I'm a little curious. And we talked about this today, sort of what the hell are we going to do in the draft? This was this morning before we had a coach. And so I think there are things that we can start to look at now that we actually have a head coach. So that part I'm excited about. I think there's some questions to be answered, but hey, look. We got a body. We got a warm body, man.
We do. And I'm excited about that. Now, Ross, that is something about Stan Van Gundy that is fantastic. Now, his defensive rankings in Miami were 8th. In Miami were 8th, 7th, and 9th. Okay? In Orlando, they were 8th, 3rd, and 1st. That's overall defensive rankings. Now, in Detroit, he never had a defense. He was the top 13 every year in Detroit. So, Van Gundy coming in, you're getting defense. Yeah. Now, that is something the Pelicans, as we all can agree on, lacked, right? Defensively, in close games, I think in clutch situations, right? I don't think it was necessarily we didn't have a closer. We couldn't get a fucking stop.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And so now we have a defensive-minded coach. Offensively, he's also not bad, right? So in Miami, he was 15th, 4th, and 5th. And then in Orlando, he was 4th, 8th, and 8th. Now, Detroit, they weren't that great. But the one thing that I am very excited about with Stan Van Gundy is that his teams are efficient from the field, right? So they're not going to have those early jacked up shots that you hate in the shot clock era. Mm-hmm. And something that I love, they get to the free throw line. Every team he's coached, top 5 in free throw percentage and attempts.
That's a good stat. I love that.
So, but the problem I'm having, right, and this is why I was so adamant of why don't we have a fucking coach is, okay, now he has 28 days to prepare for a draft, free agency, all these questions. Lonzo Ball, I don't think fits Stan Van Gundy. He wants attacking point guard. Now, Lonzo defensively, yes. Lonzo offensively, no. Lonzo offensively is not going to be hanging around the three-point line. I think I saw a tweet today. Someone was like, well, Lonzo's going to turn into a 2-guard 3-and-D guy. No, he's not. He's not. Like, as you said.
I agree.
He's too inconsistent of a shooter.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to do more. When Lonzo doesn't have a shot, he becomes a negative. Like, at least when Drew doesn't have a shot, he'll attack, he'll do different things. Lonzo, if he's off, you got him off the court.
That was one of the things that stuck out to me right away that I kind of penciled as a note was that I find Drew Holiday to be like a very, very stereotypical guard in a Stan Van Gundy system. And it's, a lot of the words we've been hearing in the offseason is that Drew might not be here next season.
Right.
Granted, he's entering the last year of a pretty big deal and this, that, and the other. And so, if you had to get rid of one of those two guys in terms of fit, Lonzo would be the one for me that would probably not hang around. But, nonetheless, that's what we can evaluate moving forward. One of the things, I think just personally for me that, and this is why I've said that Stan Van Gundy wasn't at the top of my list, because he's a little bit of a curmudgeon, right? Like
physically.
Well, yeah, physically definitely, but just the way, he's just kind of one of those. He seems a little bit like a grump, just always grumpy. And as I looked around the NBA, and it's not that those guys that like. Some of the good head coaches aren't grumpy. Pop has a little bit of that in him.
Definitely.
I think when I think curmudgeon, I probably like the number one guy that's been successful that sort of falls in line with that for me right now is Carlisle. Just looks like a anger, like he's just never really all that happy, sort of grumpy. He's like always frumping around the sideline. And as I thought about some of the teams that I'm sort of trying to emulate here, it's like, well, Spoelstra, not really a curmudgeon. Nurse, not, a lot of those. Right. A lot of the guys that I've sort of am finding interesting aren't really like that. And that's the only thing that worries me is that his personality just can wear on you, I think. And I, we'll see. But, things went bad in Detroit. I think he sort of failed from an executive standpoint.
Yeah.
Coaching wise, the team was what it was. I think they made the playoffs a couple of those years.
They did.
Look, he's clearly a competent head coach. I think for me, it's more of, is he going to be one of those guys that just turns players? Is he going to turn players off? And if so, where does that fall in line with the players we have right now? Right? Because you got these young guys that I think are trying to find their personality in the league, and you don't want somebody like Stan Van Gundy to come in and kind of hammer him down and sort of just make him grumpy.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't have a ton of basis to back that up, other than he just looks and feels like a curmudgeon.
JJ Redick, who has bounced around the league, is very well respected, did come out saying that Stan Van Gundy was by far his best and most knowledgeable coach. So him and JJ do have history back in Orlando. Do you think, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, do you think that any of the players, Zion, B.I., Drew, JJ, had any say in this hiring?
That's interesting. I think probably not. Given that I think in Griffin's short tenure here, he's been a little bit of a control freak. Mm-hmm. Everything sort of has been, at his pace and what he wants and in his timing. I would be very surprised, especially given that JJ Redick and Drew Holiday both have 1 year left on their deal.
Right.
I don't know who else you would have brought into that conversation.
Right.
Zion just doesn't have. I mean, I guess you could ask him, but he has no. He's had one. He's been in the year for one coach 1 year. And BI, just not really. I don't think any of those guys really warranted bringing into that conversation, and I don't think Griffin would have brought him in anyway at this point.
No, I agree. I agree. The one thing that I don't think anybody's talking about, right, and I've noticed this now, is Josh Hart, Ingram, and Ball. This is their third coach in 3 years. Yeah. Zion Williamson, this is his second coach in 2 years. This guy, Stan Van Gundy, Griffin knows this has to be stability right here. Now, from what I've heard, he's going to bring accountability, which Gentry never had.
Yep.
He's going to bring stability, and he's going to bring, if you're not playing defense, if you're not going to do this, go on the bench. Bye-bye. I can get with it, but as you said, that does worry me a little bit. He's 61. He kind of looks like a grumpy guy. He's a bunch of young dudes that want to play, all this stuff. So that does scare me a little bit, but he wins.
Look, and I can't, and it's hard for me to play both sides of this coin, right? Because I said all year, Gentry, great assistant coach, players guy, but at some point,
there's no accountability.
He can't be. He's just not a head coach. He's failed as a head coach numerous times, and it's because I think of this friendly, hey, he's got our back type of thing. So, look, I'm okay. I think going a little in the opposite direction. For me, it's more of I think from a coaching perspective what Van Gundy's going to do. I just hope he falls somewhere between the grumpy, on your ass all the time. Like, I hope he's not like on a Tom Thibodeau
Tom Thibodeau's another
or
guy.
Jim Boylan level. And it's just, if he's just a hair less than that, like these guys need to be pushed a little bit, I think. And so
God, yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with, I think BI and Zion and those guys, I mean, need a little bit of a kick in the ass. Like,
They do.
They
Zion
and this is
Williamson needs
where
a kick in the ass.
And this is
There's no doubt about it.
this is where your assistant coaches are going to be so important.
Yes.
So important.
And that's what I'm a little worried about now is like we're so late in the game that all these great assistants have been scooped up. But do the Pelicans hire back David Fitch? Like, he's still out there. He didn't get the Pacers job, right? So like I don't know who's been fired from the Pelicans staff under Gentry. Bill's that? Like, I have no idea if he's been fired. He hasn't. Like, there's not been. Like, we're not retaining him for next year. So I'm interested to see, like, is Griffin going to have a say in the coaching staff? I don't know.
I wouldn't think. I mean, you've got to take a step back at a certain point.
You
You're going to have to let Stan Van Gundy
get his guys.
I mean, at least from a coaching perspective, you've got to let him bring his guys in. Now, I would assume, the draft, I guess, will be a coordinated effort between.
Yep.
It's odd. It's interesting for me because, again, I feel like Griffin is very much wants to be in control and wants his say to be by far the most important, if not the only voice in the room. And Van Gundy, what was most important for him for his last job was having a bigger say in personnel, which is why he was the president of basketball operations and all that. And that went poorly. So has he taken now a full step back and said, hey, you know what? Screw the other shit. I'm just going to focus on being a basketball coach. Or does he still want, where does all of that go? Clearly, Griffin wouldn't have hired this guy if he thought he was going to be a pain in his ass. So I'm assuming that, Van Gundy's going to be allowed to do all the coaching stuff, bring in his guys, and then.
Yeah, I think this has been Griffin's guy since day one, right? So during the bubble,
you really think so?
I do, because hear me out.
It's astounding to me.
Hear me out. During once the Pelicans left, there was that 30 days in the bubble. The Clippers were in there, the Lakers were in there. He was broadcasting games. We didn't hear a single word about who we're going to hire next year. And I think this has kind of been like Griffin's like, okay, I want SVG. I really think he honed in on him. Didn't tell anybody. Didn't just let all the cards play out, and that was his guy. So if it's Griffin's guy, it's my guy. Like, I'm on board. I want him. Like, fine. He does have experience with young superstars. Dwayne Wade, Dwight Howard. Blake Griffin's not young, but he's a superstar in my mind. Like, he has that. He does have that experience. Now, Dwight Howard said, there was something weird with the media. Like, I wanted him fired. Dwight Howard's like, no, I never wanted him fired. Things like that. Who knows? All I know is that he's our guy. He's our guy. He's my guy. I'm ready to roll.
I am too. He's not this Van Gundy was not a bottom of the barrel. Like, there were a few guys we said just hell no, right? Kid, D'Antoni
for sure.
There were and Stan Van Gundy wasn't. And again, it was just because there was no word about it. He wasn't even a guy that was on my radar a month ago.
Right. I don't think it's anybody's radar.
And so it kind of came out of nowhere. Right. But he's got a little pedigree to him, right? Like, the guy's won.
That's what so I remember when me and you go back and forth about Gentry, and you're like, he's never won. Look at his record. He's never won. You look at Van Gundy's record, he's won. And he's brought teams to the finals. And I think he got jobbed out of the Miami thing when Pat Riley came in and was like, hey, bye, see you later. I'm going to be the head coach. That was a good team. They went on to win the championship. Right. Now he's reached the finals with Orlando. I think he was set up to fail in Detroit. I don't really necessarily count Detroit. When you're trying to be a GM and a coach, are you kidding me?
It doesn't work. Hey, I agree. It doesn't work. I mean, it's part on him, and I'm hoping he's learned his lesson. But look, I agree. I mean, and if you remember, those really successful Orlando teams were kind of the beginning of the 4 out.
Yeah,
I mean, I've got to go back a little ways now, but I mean, I very, very vividly remember thinking that, that's all everybody talked about every Orlando game was that, this was sort of the beginning of that innovation of, look, we've got this elite big guy and we're just going to play. Exactly. And so you got Turk, and he ended up getting all these guys, and they were really successful, went to a finals, and I guess I'm just trying to figure out sort of where we're going to go with the roster we have right now.
I know that's why I was so upset with, and I tweeted out today. That's why I was so upset for taking so long, because we don't have a lot of time. We have so many question marks,
and they're young. It's not. It's not. If you had a bunch of veterans, it's like, you know what? Come in, bring that veteran coach in, they'll figure it out.
You got 2 guys on a contract year in Hart and Lonzo Ball. Drew Holiday trade rumors. What are we doing, Derek Favors? JJ Redick's on a contract year. There are so many questions. That's why I was like, why the fuck are we waiting so long? But listen,
We're at where we're at.
Griffin got his guy. Now we can roll. Now I think Van Gundy should have a say on who stays, who goes, who we're going to draft. I'm a little worried about that now because as we're going to start previewing the draft, there are some certain selections at the 13th spot that could really fit in Stan Van Gundy's philosophy here. Like, there's that dude from Florida State. There's a couple shooters out there. Listen, 28 days to prepare for an NBA draft. That's not a lot. But
during a pandemic when theoretically you're not going to be traveling as much, back in the day you saw everybody. I mean, you saw more guys than.
And that's another thing. They don't get to bring these guys in and go face to face. Hey, go work out. They can't do that, right? Yep. So, I was saying Patrick Williams from Florida State, great rim protector guy. I'm writing up on him.
Yeah, 3-and-D.
He's a 3-and-D guy. You got Tyrell Terry from Stanford, a little point guard. He can really shoot it. And there are some options there, and I'm a little scared that we're behind the 8 ball here going into the draft.
Yeah, look, and as we won't sort of blow the top off of that today. We've got a lot we've got more to come on the draft as we're working through that. But as I'm starting to evaluate players and watch film, I mean, it's one of those years where, man, if we could just move up a couple spots, there are some guys that I think are gonna just get taken before us that are really nice fits, especially with Van Gundy. Not so much with Gentry's sort of run and gun and defense, if you have time for it. There's a few guys that are going to go before the Pelicans pick that would be really nice to have, and you've got this treasure trove of assets.
Yeah.
Is this the year? Is it next year? I mean, what point do you try to package things together? And there's a lot of that work that needs to be done because, look, over the next 2 years, this roster is going to look just
completely different.
There's just no two ways about that.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Speaking of dirty clothes, give our guys Hamper a call. They handle all your dirty clothes for $10 a load. They will come pick up your clothes, your dirty clothes. They will wash, dry, and fold your clothes and deliver it the next day. That is Tryhamper, TRYHAMPR.com, Tryhamper.com. We have a special guest coming on. His name is Elliot Clough of Believe in the New Orleans Pelicans and a writer for the Bird Rights. He does a fantastic job on Twitter. Also, go check out his podcast. He does fantastic work. We've been on there before. We promised our guy Elliot that he would come on our podcast once we finally hired a coach.
What's up, man?
Elliot, what's going on, brother?
I'm awesome, man. And you're right. It's finally, because this has taken forever. I mean, like, I'm glad they did their due diligence. I'm glad the front office, David Griffin, did what they needed to do, took their time. But 2 months, man, it's been rough. It's been really rough.
It's been tough. So right off the bat, give me your initial reaction to Stan Van Gundy and how you think he's going to fit in this organization and what do you think of the hire?
For sure. So, SVG, much like a lot of other Pelicans fans, like you guys, he wasn't my top choice. He was a top choice, probably a guy that a lot of us probably didn't really think of until the name was released. I believe it was by Woj, but I like it, and I like it a lot for a lot of reasons, and the main reasons being that he is the polar opposite of Alvin Gentry in a lot of ways. And I mean, we're talking defense. We're talking account of freaking ability. Yeah. We're talking, getting up and down the floor, but that not being the main focus of what they want to do. I mean, he's going to instill, like I said, accountability with these guys, but they're also going to be developed and they're going to be treated like they're adults. Even though this is a pretty young team, he is going to hold them to a certain standard. And if you deviate from that standard, there's going to be consequences. And what that looks like, obviously, we'll see. But, I mean, I'm all in. I think this is a guy that you need for a team that has Zion Williamson, whose weight has fluctuated way too much over the last however long it's been. Lonzo Ball, who's shown a lot of flashes about how good he can be, but then he'll go, 2 of 13, and we just aren't really sure if he's going to stick around or not. And then there's Brandon Ingram, who is still learning, needs to get better defensively. Talk about getting better defensively. Talk about Zion there too. And SVG is a guy who will have the team's respect right off the bat. I mean, he is a winning coach.
Yeah.
Of his 11 seasons, I mean, 7 full 11 seasons, 7 were winning, and 3 of the 4 losing seasons were with the Pistons, who are a garbage franchise. So, I mean, take what you will there, but I got this tweet. It was from some random Pelicans fan, and I think this is really going to lay it out for us, is that in his tenure as a head coach in the NBA, SVG has 523 wins with a 57% winning percentage.
Yeah.
And the Pels, as a franchise, since their inception, 2002, 2003, have 673 wins.
Wow. That's a stat right
Yeah.
there.
It's a big stat.
So, exactly. 150-plus win season in the franchise's history, and SVG has 5. So this is an upgrade. Whether it's you believe he's a championship head coach, a guy who can lead the Pelicans to a championship is one thing, but he is going to make them better. That is the bottom line. And if the Pels become a winning franchise, that's a hell of a lot better than what we've seen for the last decade. So
yeah,
I'm in. I'm all in.
Yeah, that's look, you bring up a lot of interesting stuff, Elliot. And, one of the things Justin and I just kicked around, especially as we went back through, Stan Van Gundy's history, is the type of teams and players he's had. And so, look, it's easy to look back and point to some of the really great defensive teams he's had. Those have been anchored by elite defensive centers. Shaq, Alonzo Mourning was in there. You had peak Dwight Howard. You had Andre Drummond. He's always had one of the elite rim protectors in the league. That's obviously not something the Pelicans have. And so one thing I'm curious about is how we go about remaking this defense and what, Van Gundy's plans will be. Obviously he's not going to have all the say for the roster, but how he's going to work with what we have, to turn what was a putrid defensive team into a respectable one. Because I don't think it'll take much for us to go from really bad to reasonable, and who knows how many wins are attached to that change. So that, I think as I'm thinking about it, that's one thing I'm trying to think through. I don't know if you have any insight or what you think, what direction we might go.
Right, and that's fair. That's totally fair. I mean, we've talked a lot about the offense and how that's going to work with a small ball Zion, because Dwight Howard, I mean, when he was in the Orlando with the Magic and SVG was there, it was a 4-out, 1-in type of offense.
Right.
And I think that's something that's really going to work with Zion, especially considering how dominant he is down low and how good of a passer he is. In terms of defense, I mean, I think I'm not sure where you guys are at, but I'm pretty sure the Pels are not going to bring back Derek Favors, nor do I think he is going to be a defensive stalwart like we were hoping he would be. He's a shell of himself, and he's not going to be that cornerstone center like we're talking about. The options, as far as it's tough because we're not in the league what it used to be. I mean, there are defensive stalwart centers, there are good centers, but it's just not that way like it was in the early 2000s and the mid 2010s, and then it developed when Steph came into the league. Obviously, it's a three-point shooting league. So, I mean, you're going to have to go into free agency as to what that looks like. I mean, JaVale McGee could be available. I don't know how much you guys love him.
Isn't Dwight Howard available?
Yeah, no, look,
right, he is.
I'm glad. I really am. I'm glad you mentioned, some 4-out around Zion, because I think that's where people are wanting to go. The one thing that really worries me, and again, going back to, I mentioned the rim protection of Dwight Howard and Shaq and Andre Drummond. The other thing those guys is elite rebounders. I mean, at the time Van Gundy had them, those guys were all the very, the cream of the crop in the NBA in terms of defensive rebounding. And so those are the things I think Van Gundy's he's got his work cut out for him. We don't have, when I look at power forward center, I mean, look, a more in shape Zion Williamson is going to rebound the basketball a little better, I hope. But at the 5, we don't necessarily have a guy that's just going to chew up defensive rebounds. And Justin, you talked about the way that he wants to play on offense and the way he worked to get good shots, and we get to the line. Defensive rebounding is a huge piece of all of that.
So I've learned, Elliot and Ross, like, in order to win games, you got to out rebound and you got to win. You got to win the free throw battle. I thought with the Pelicans and Gentry system, we just didn't do that. We launched threes and blah blah blah. I think why Van Gundy's so successful is he gets stops on the defensive end. He rebounds very well. His teams rebound very well, and his teams get to the free throw line. Elliot, I mean, I think every team that he's coached is top 10 in free throw attempts and percentage. So that's something that
yeah.
that's something I really like with Van Gundy. But Ellie, I wanted to bring something up to with free agency being so scarce. What about a trade for Rudy Gobert? Is that like completely and utterly out of the? Listen, just listen. Ross is like killing me, but tell me why not. Tell me why not.
Me or Elliot?
Let Elliot go first, and then we'll go with Ross.
I've had McCade Pearson on from the Home Court Press podcast on my podcast to talk on Believe in the New Orleans Pelicans to preview their matchup, the first game in the bubble with the Pels. And the Jazz are just enamored with Rudy Gobert. I mean, how can you not be? He's one of the best defensive players in the league, and he makes them a whole hell of a lot better. But this, I don't know. I mean, what do you want the Pels to give up? I mean, the first thought is obviously going to be Drew. But I don't know. I don't know how they acquire him, because the Jazz are probably going to want a lot in exchange.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the package typically has been Drew plus JJ plus something else, and JJ was so integral in bringing SVG in. Like, how do you include him in a package now?
Yeah.
I like it in theory. I just don't know how you put it into practice.
It's just the reason why I brought it up is our buddy Alexander Albiad wanted me to be like, Justin, you need to do more trade machines. So like Rudy Gobert came up, Ross.
No, I just think he's a guy. I mean, he's off the table. They're not. The Jazz aren't moving. They'd be insane to move. But I think not as good of a player, but a player that Van Gundy has a little experience with going into the last year of his deal. He's got a bloated salary, you would think Andre Drummond is beyond gettable. I mean, is beyond gettable if you can make the salaries work. I do wonder if somebody like that is a more reasonable target than basically the best center in the game.
Here's why I disagree with that. It's because we've learned, and I think both y'all can agree with me, you got to have a stretch five that can at least shoot 35, 36% from the three-point line when Zion's on the floor. I think we all saw that Melly lineup of like how efficient Melly and Zion became. So I don't necessarily know if I want this clunker of a center again that clogs up the paint.
I'm not disagreeing with you. The problem is all the things we just talked about. That Zion Williamson didn't rebound the basketball at all,
right,
and didn't protect the paint at all. And Stan Van Gundy historically has had the exact opposite of that as his big guy. And so, like, I'm not saying that we shift away from building the team around Zion. I'm not even remotely saying that. But it's not out of the question to think that Stan Van Gundy's going to want to come in here and say, well, if Favors is gone and all I got is Jackson Hayes, well, that shit ain't going to work.
Right.
So let's figure out what we can do to and look, I mean, look, he's a good coach. He's going to work with what he has, but it's just something to start thinking about as we sort of move into the draft and free agency.
Elliot, who do you think is maybe necessarily a target at that center position for the Pelicans?
So I was going to make the exact same point you guys just made, so I'm very glad that you said that. Now, in terms of free agency, when we look at Andre Drummond, he does have a player option that's worth $25 million right now. I don't know how the Pels make that money work. He's just – there's virtually no chance he develops any sort of jump shot. So he's not my guy when we look at the potential going forward. He is 27, so you like the I guess reasonable youth. But then you look at if you're looking for just a defensive guy who's going to protect and get boards, Tristan Thompson's available this offseason. You won't have to pay him a lot of money. But if you're looking for spacing and immediate value, I know we talked about this the first time you were on the pod, Justin. Myers Leonard is a free agent.
My guy.
You won't have to pay him much. I know you hate Aaron Baines, but he hit 7 threes in a game or something like that this year, 9.
He's just never healthy, Elliot. That's the only thing I can't get with him.
That's true. And then, I mean, you go down the list. Nerlens Noel is making $2 million this year. Why not go out and get him? He's definitely a guy who's a get boards and play defense, and he's only 26. So, I mean, Willie Cauley-Stein's out there. He's on a player option this year for $2 million. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't turn that down. I mean, if we want to go youth and potential, Thon Maker's still out there. That's, I guess, kind of a possibility. And then, of course, there's Dwight Howard, and if there's one – SVG wants a reunion, I would not be upset with Howard at all.
That's an interesting name, Ross. Dwight Howard. Is there a possibility of maybe a reunion in New Orleans? But would Dwight Howard in his career coming off a championship, would he want to go to necessarily the Pelicans, who are, I don't know. I mean, we're not a championship contending team right now. We're kind of in the middle. Do you think Dwight Howard would come down here?
You'd have to overpay him, and that's
Yeah,
where
that's
that's
just
the
not something we
problem.
can do.
Like, I mean,
It's just- we can't do that.
theoretically, the Lakers are going to give him another vets minimum, and they're going to have a team that can come in and win a championship again.
Yeah.
I mean, what's more important for a guy like that that's already made just a fucking gajillion dollars?
Yeah. Elliot.
And the Warriors are interested in him this offseason.
Yeah, I saw that
so
too,
He's
Elliot.
He's got options. Yeah.
Elliot, before we let you go, I want to hear a couple names that you think the Pelicans will target here in the NBA draft here in the next 3 weeks.
Right. So if you want to see more on this, I put an article together on it. But
Where can we
on
find
the
that?
bird rights.
Go ahead. The bird
Sorry?
rights. The bird rights.
Yes,
You
the
can
bird
find that?
rights.
Okay.
Yep. And my top guy at 13 is, and they might have to move up to get him, whether they package pieces and move or just package picks and move up or what have you. But the guy with the really high ceiling, who's going to be a 3-and-D guy, who we've talked about that the Pels could totally use, is Patrick Williams.
Yep. That's what I got.
There we go. He's very raw, but he has a super high ceiling, and he could be very good. He could be the third star with Zion and B.I. in New Orleans for a long time. I've heard him being mentioned as a draft and stash guy because he is so raw. But if you're taking it 13, you're probably going to be on the bench. And then that would be better for him, I think, in terms of development, working with actual NBA pros. And I think he could contribute some minutes and learn a lot this year with SVG. Other options you're looking at are Pokashevsky. I've seen him mocked to the Pels at 13, and I've seen him mocked to the Pels at 39. So there's a lot of options there. He's another really, really high ceiling guy, fairly low floor. So, that's what you're going to be looking at in the first round is the high-risk guys. And the other one is going to be Kyra Lewis, who I think is more of a safe bet, point guard from Alabama. I have a draft guy that's been on my podcast before, Ethan Piota. He's my guy for this type of stuff. And he is all about Kyra Lewis, all about Pokashevsky. And Lewis, the one thing he pointed out is that the speed differential between college basketball and the NBA is the biggest thing and the biggest adjustment that a lot of prospects have going into the NBA. And Kyra Lewis is probably the fastest prospect in this year's draft. You just watch 5 minutes of his highlight tape and you're like, damn, did he run track or what? So those are my 3 guys off the top of my head, and then there's those guys that are up towards the top. Like I love Onyeka Okongwu. I highly doubt that they're able to get him, but that he's a big from USC, played with LaMelo Ball in high school, and he is a stud. I love Okongwu.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about Patrick Williams. I actually watched some film on him today. His shot release is extremely slow, but my God, is he a fucking beast around the rim. You want to talk about a rim protector? He's got a 6'11" wingspan, which is above average for his size. He is projected to be a 3-and-D guy. You could put him at the 4 and Zion at the 5 or flip-flop it. If he can knock down some threes, that becomes really scary. Ross, I watched him. He was impressive. I really like Elliot. I'm glad you mentioned him because I actually have a write-up on him here. We're about to release our draft preview here pretty soon, but he's a guy, Elliot, that I really, really like. But there's one guy that I think the Pelicans can use, and it's Aaron Naismith from Vanderbilt. You want to talk about just a dead-on knockdown shooter, a guy who can run off screens. He literally reminds me of Klay Thompson coming off screens. Now, defensively, he's average and things like that, and he can't really create separation. But my God, you want to talk about the 4-in-1 or the 4-out 1-in and surround Zion with shooters? He's your guy.
Oh yeah, Naismith is scary, especially off a screen, catch and shoot guy.
Serious.
You said it. He is knocked down.
Serious.
If the Pels actually ended up hiring Jerry Stackhouse, I would have been like locked in. Naismith is going to the Pelicans, done deal. But Antonio Daniels said this on my podcast, whatever it was, 5-6 weeks ago that he was on. He said you can never have enough shooters in the NBA, and that is it to a T. Should Williams be off the board, Pokashevsky, Kyra Lewis, whatever, or if they feel like Naismith is a better fit with the Pels, I'm all in. That dude, he does not miss, like, ever. for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, look him up on YouTube. It's a pretty stroke.
It's serious. Look, Elliot, I want to thank you so much for joining our show. We got to keep doing this more. Listen, Elliot Clough of Believe in the New Orleans Pelicans. Listen, guys, he does some great stuff with his podcast, with his writing for the Bird Rights. Give this guy a follow. He is balls to the wall of the Pelicans. Also, a UNI graduate. I wanted to shout that out there. A lot of people don't know about that UNI graduate. So that's
Go
Elliot
Cats,
Clough.
man. Go Cats.
Elliot, thanks for joining the show, my man.
For sure, fellas. You guys are the best.
Take it easy, brother.
Bye.
Later. Elliot Clough of Believe in the New Orleans Pelicans. Great guy. Ross, go ahead. Closing statements.
I'm excited. Look, we are now past the coaching thing, and we can dive sort of headfirst into off season, right? I mean, this was sort of the roadblock, the hurdle. Yeah. Like, okay, well, now we have an off season. We at least have things to evaluate. We can look at the type of player Stan Van Gundy has historically wanted in the draft, or played early in their careers, or gotten free agency. We can start to do that kind of work because theoretically we have an identity now. We've got a coach. We need more coaches. We got one. We need more. But we got one.
We got one.
And that was the big thing. So look, I'm excited. He wasn't he wasn't on the like absolute can't hire list that we had.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited, man.
I mean, can we talk about, before we wrap it up, how brutally wrong we were with who the next head coach of the Pelicans was going to be? I mean, like, you just never knew. Griffin didn't give you anything.
Yeah, I mean, look, we were wrong, but at the same time, we were right in the sense that there were a couple. I mean, there were guys; those were names out there, and D'Antoni is a name that was out there. And for me, in this situation, it was more important not to be dead wrong than it was to maybe get one of the splashy names. Yeah. And so, while again Van Gundy wasn't the top of the list, I think it was more important that you didn't get one of those shitheads.
Yeah, like a Jason Kidd. Like,
right.
He was literally the worst candidate for this job.
And so that part is you look. I mean, everybody guessed. I don't think there's one. I mean, you go back a month ago. I bet you can't find me one person that said, who's going to get this job? Stanley.
Stanley. God, I keep calling him Stan.
Stanley. So I mean, whatever. Stanley. Like, yeah, we were wrong, but fuck it. So was everybody else.
No, listen. I'm excited. At first, I was like, God, I don't want him now. Looking back, he might be the right kind of guy.
And he's looking. If nothing else, you're going to get just a ton of sound bites.
Oh, yeah.
Just a ton of sound bites.
Like, first thing he does in New Orleans, you think he just grabs a cocktail. Maybe.
Yeah, he strikes me as like a big, like
grab a whiskey or something.
Maybe not a whiskey, but like definitely a cocktail and like a heavy meal. God, like a very heavy meal, like an etouffee guy.
What's his first restaurant he hits up? Maybe like a Clancy's.
Like something heavy.
Something like
Drago's, maybe.
That's crazy. I was thinking about Drago's.
Just going to pound some like fried seafood, some oysters.
Steak. Gosh. Good, dude. Good hunk of meat. You get a good hunk of meat at Clancy's for sure. Some seafood. Drago's fantastic too.
Can't beat it.
Listen, we got a coach. Now we got to draft some players. We got to sign Brandon Ingram. Derek Favors gone. Real quick before we leave, are we trading Drew Holiday? Yes or no?
No.
Are we trading Lonzo Ball?
I hope yes.
What are we doing, Josh Hart?
Doesn't matter.
Someone tweeted
it just has absolutely no effect on
I think
the
it's Pelicans Empire tweeted today. Now insert Josh Hart in the starting lineup. I said, what the fuck is wrong with you?
It's just like, this is one of those things where people
what
look.
Are you talking about?
You can't. This is a whole separate. I shouldn't start on this, but you can't watch a game and be in love with the guy that's just running really hard and working. Right. Like, that's great. There's value in that. I'm not saying there's not value in that, but like overall, like Josh Hart wasn't that great this year.
Like, shot like 35% from the 3 minutes average.
He's just okay. He was just an okay guy.
Rebounded. He'll fit well with Van Gundy. He rebounds.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an okay. I mean, just a solid, like replaceable guy.
He's a great bench piece. He's a great bench piece.
I mean, he comes in and he hustles.
He's a starting two guard in the NBA.
No, God, no.
People say things on Twitter.
He's a guy that is like polarizing in the sense that, like, when he's out there, he's clearly working hard. Yeah, and like, that's great. That's good. It's appreciated. you need a guy like that on the team, but
Gotta
like
have a
he's
guy.
he's in my opinion just like a very replaceable guy.
There's a million of them.
Doesn't really do anything that's like super great. Not the
Rebounds
best
for his
shooter.
size, but-
He rebounds for his size. Okay, I mean that's good.
tap on the ass.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. He's not a priority for me. I
Not
mean,
a priority.
if he's back, great. If he's not,
Also an avid gamer. Like his gaming skills are like.
Well, that's
too
good.
Much, maybe.
That's good.
They're a little too much. For
I don't
me.
dislike him. I don't.
No,
even
he's
say
a
I
good
dislike him.
guy.
But like, there are people that really think like, man, if we'd have just plugged Josh Hart in,
Would you have him on the show?
yeah, I'd have him on the show. He seems like a reasonable guy. I mean,
Chat it up.
Yeah, talk to him.
Josh, come on by, brother.
we got an extra seat. We got
Yeah,
3 seats in
right
here.
here.
Bring your friends.
Definitely bring your friends.
Bring a
We can do
friend.
that. We have a couple Trulies, some Twisted Teas. Shout out Sportsman's Paradise Podcast. Fantastic stuff. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Pels Talk. Go visit www.bootcrewmedia.com for articles previewing the NBA draft. That was Elliot Clough of Believe in the New Orleans Pelicans joining our show.
We are going to have a draft party somewhere.
I
We've
want
got
to do
it
it
narrowed
Fat Boys.
down to
I want
like
to call it out. Michael Corciani, Nikki Corciani, Gabe Corciani. We want to do a draft party at Fat Boys. A couple dollars off the slice of pizza. They're
mean, that's
fantastic.
pitcher of
Couple
beer.
of beers. I don't know.
Bring a
But
crowd.
You know what? They got a little Marg machine.
They do. They do.
Fantastic.
We were just in there.
just
Slices.
unbelievable.
I mean, just
The
big as this
slice is-
table.
it's huge. That's what she said.
Make it happen. Look, we want. Look, Fat Boys. We want this.
Or he said.
We want this.
If anyone gets that reference, it's Michael Scott. Just so we're clear. Yes, Fat Boys.
Fat
reach out
Boys
to
is
us.
on notice.
Yes. Also, thanks to our sponsors, Hamper. Fantastic. Good stuff. Truly, Twisted Tea. All those guys. Candle Daddy.
Candle Daddy.
My guys, Candle Daddy. Okay.
Check him
Go
out.
visit
Use code BootCrew.
Boot Crew to
Good
get 10%
stuff.
off.
Great Christmas gifts.
Morning Wood. These
Well hung.
D's nuts. What else we got? Coffee.
Pumpkin spice up in this bitch.
In this bitch. I feel like we're off the rails. By the way, Stephen Offner, if you're listening, come back to us. We kind of miss you.
I hope the CIA thing really went well for him.
He's
But-
really nimble on his feet. He's very quick.
Yeah.
Quick like a cat. Thanks for joining us. See y'all later. Go Pels.
Took away. That's what this. Get your money's worth. Now, that was exactly. Ingram. Timeout. Right here. Here's Zion for 3. Hit it again. He loves being. Oh, and how about Ingram on the floater and the foul? Did you say floater? You got it. That ain't no floater. Oh, put it this way. It was a finger roll of anything. That's a dunk.